Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Crest Network's weekly webinar. My name is Bill Giannone, and this week we're going to be talking about different types of staffing models, and we will be hopefully discussing one that is going to be right for you guys. So for the next 45 minutes or so, we just want to explore different types of staffing models, different formats and shapes of companies, and hopefully you'll be able to pick up some tips and some advice that can work well for your company, whether now or in the future. What type of company are you? Most likely, your company falls into one of these three distinct categories of business, and usually they involve your level of involvement. First, we have what we call the chuck in a truck. Many in our industry view this as a very pejorative term, but it's really not. It's really something that's just supposed to signify an owner who is very much the part of the production part of the business. For most companies, this is how we all started out. We were the original crew leader, we were the original project manager, we were the original marketer, and we were the original salesman. So the chuck in a truck is just to refer to the size of a company where maybe you have a family member running the office, maybe the office is operating out of your home, and maybe you're using your garage as your warehouse. There's nothing wrong with that. Like I said, a lot of companies have started out that way. There are many successful companies that still operate this way. But this is one way that we identify companies. The next step up from that would be your owner operator. The owner operator may have a single truck, they may have two or three trucks. But most of the time, the owner operator is still heavily involved in the business. Most times they're acting as the project manager on every job. They're intimately aware of the jobs. They're doing a lot of the scoping and the paperwork. They may be going out and signing up the jobs themselves. They may be creating the exactimates. They may be sketching out the loss. And then they may be overseeing the production when they have a couple of their crew members come out. This really is the sweet spot for most restorers in our industry. I would say any restorer who is operating at about $1 million, give or take a couple of 100,000 of gross revenue, I would consider them to be owner operators. Most of them are doing it this way, where they're handling most of their own marketing, they're doing a lot of the collections themselves, and they may have a small office staff. But by and large, you've got a process and a system set up where everything runs through the owner. Again, this really does count for the vast majority of the restoration companies in our industry. The third model that you might fall into would be the owner-manager model. Now, there are different names for this. I like to use the owner-manager model because most everybody understands owner-operator, and I like to use the same kind of terminology to denote the difference in the mindset. Your owner-manager model relies on processes and people within the system to execute their business plan. Your owner manager is going to concentrate on the financials and the growth aspect of the company, knowing he cannot be intimately involved with every project. Okay, he does not know the names of every client in many cases because he's managing from what we will call a 10,000-foot level. He's leaving the day-to-day production responsibilities to other people. And as we go through this, you'll understand how that is possible. For many of you who are so involved with your business and you're sitting there saying, well, there's no way I could give up that knowledge or that control, we're going to discuss some ways where you can put a system together that enables you to do just that. You have to be able to give up a little bit of control and a little bit of hands-on if you want growth. If you're involved in every project, then the number of projects your company can do is solely limited to the amount of hours you can devote to your business. I have to be honest with you, in all my years helping out restoration clients around the country, the sweet spot number where they start to get overwhelmed is about 1.2 million. 1.2 million usually represents about 20 jobs a month. At 20 jobs a month, it's almost impossible for an owner to be that involved in the business. Now, you can get to 1.2 million by doing a lot of other parts of the business, if you want to do contents or asbestos or reconstruction services, your gross revenues can get to $1.2 million, and you can do that with far fewer projects. But if you're talking just residential water or even commercial water, and hopefully you are if you're involved with Crest and you're taking some of the things we are saying to heart, the thing to remember and the thing to understand is once you get to a point where you can't get to any more projects but still need to have that hands-on owner operator feel, you've maxed out. And usually the number is no more than 20, and that would be a lot for an owner to be involved in. That's 4 projects, 5 projects a week. That's 1 new project a day. On the work week for most owners, that's more than enough for them to be able to handle and be involved with. But $1.2 million is usually the breaking point for most companies where the owner says, my model's not working. I need to go to an owner manager model. Okay, the other things you have to realize is that you will need to have larger amounts of staff to handle these responsibilities that you were handling all on your own. Now, what comes first, the chicken or the egg? Does the larger company come requiring a larger staff, or do you need to staff up in order to handle this larger amount of business? Well, that's something we're going to discuss going forward. Let's talk about your staffing needs if you're a chuck and a truck. Basically, a chuck and a truck is a hub and spoke model where you have very, very few staff, but everybody directly reports to the owner. All the responsibilities for the entire company fall in the lap of the owner. And you'll see from our little chart here that all the different pieces of your business, the admin, the production, the marketing, and I call it the invoicing because there's really not a lot of financial work going on if you're a chuck and a truck. Your biggest concern is getting the invoicing out and getting paid. You'll see that the owner does all of these tasks with some help on the admin and production side. But normally, this is what we look at when we think of our plumbers, for instance. If we see a local plumber, Joe's Plumbing, he's operating out of his own truck. He's probably doing his books at night when he gets home, or his wife is taking care of it, and he's handling everything himself. Again, there are advantages to this. If you desire to keep your business very small and have very little overhead, and if you need to have total control, then there is an advantage to this model. However, as you will see, the disadvantages are that you have literally no time away from your company. If you're not working, your company's not working. You have all of the burden. If you get sick one day, or if you just decide you want to go away, your company shuts down. Every time there's a problem or an issue, you are the one handling it. That 2 o'clock in the morning call, yes, you're the one getting out of bed and going and handling that. You also have no leverage over your time-money equation. Remember, when we're a worker, what we're essentially doing is we're trading time for money. We're either a contract employee where we're working by the hour. We might be a regular salaried employee where we have a weekly pay. But in both cases, there's an expectation of time commitment that ties into and corresponds to our compensation. So at the end of the day, every worker is trading time for money. When you own a company, when you become your own boss, the theory is that you want to get away from the time-money equation. Well, as a chuck and a truck, there's no way to do that because for every minute you're not working, you're not making money. So just understand that what you're doing here is you're basically hiring yourself. So you're not an owner as much as you are your own employee. Let's move on to the owner-operator now. The owner-operator uses what we call a hands-on model. It's not necessarily a hub and spoke. It's more involved in the owner delegating some responsibility, but also still ultimately responsible himself. So I use the term sharing responsibilities. And over the different parts of the business, many times the owner will have full control. In most cases, in owner-operator companies, even if they do have a marketer, the owner drives the marketing 100% in most cases for owner-operators. most cases, the owner on the admin side will have an office manager who is kind of a do everything kind of a person. They're the type that's going to be there and managing everything, answering the phones, doing all the paperwork, making sure all the orders get placed properly, doing the communication many times with the clients, sending out emails. Many times that office manager is a one-stop shop for everything that you need. And again, sometimes it's the spouse of the owner, sometimes it's a relative, many times it's just a very valuable employee. And we'll find, guys, as we continue to grow our company, that person becomes more and more vital to the ultimate success or failure of our company, because that person sometimes develops so many good habits that cannot be replicated that they become very, very vital to your success going forward. In other times, they develop many habits that cannot be replicated in a bad way because they hold on to too much responsibility. Now, remember, what we're doing here is we're showing growth. And we're saying when you go from chucking a truck to owner operator all the way up to owner manager, you need to keep relinquishing responsibilities. Well, the trick going from owner operator to owner manager is these core people that are here with you in your owner operator stage will also need to be giving up responsibilities because they're going to become specialists moving forward. This office manager person might be an excellent bookkeeper, and that might become their sole responsibility moving forward. Now, that means you might have to pass along the filing of the paperwork and keeping track of the communications on projects to someone else. If this admin person refuses to do that or makes it difficult for the new person to train or the new process to take place, you're actually having a situation where the growth is being choked by someone within the process. And we're going to discuss the process a little further down the road. I just want to make sure you understand it's important to have really good people at this level, at the owner operator level. Don't take them for granted, but at the same time, make sure you're not giving them too much responsibility where they become as powerful as you. Moving over to the left-hand side, on the production side, many times you're still involved in going out to the jobs, but you might have a lead tech who's going to be going out there and helping you with the scope and sketch and signing the jobs and things like that. But ultimately, you're still there to oversee the work. So you are hands-on, but you're not solely dedicated the way the chuck in a truck is. The advantages are that you've got slightly more freedom and you've got a slight chance for growth because owner operators can have several different trucks. You can have 2 or 3 crews and still consider yourself an owner operator. So that's where it's different than the chuck in a truck because you would be on every job. Here, you might not be the lead or the first man on every job, but you're still going to be heavily involved with every job. You also have a chance for growth in other ways as well. You can start hiring a marketer to do that work, and you can start doing a little bit more of the management side while still being heavily involved. The disadvantage is, though, you are still too involved and you're not able to grow and you're not what we call scalable. The model that we show here is not a scalable model because the responsibility still lies too closely with ownership. Moving on to the owner-manager model, this is where it gets a little hairy for a lot of guys, and many times owners start to balk when I discuss going from owner-operator to owner-manager. Let me go back real quickly and just show you the difference in the charts. On the owner-operator model, you'll look at the owner is directly tied to the people doing the work. Moving ahead to the owner-manager model, we see that there is a layer put in between the owner and the people doing the work. That is a scary prospect for a lot of owners. And I'm here to tell you that it is scary, it is difficult, and for some people, it cannot be managed. I've worked with a couple of owners who we have instituted this for, and they got so nervous and their entire mindset couldn't deal with this process. So what we ended up doing is we ended up having to sell the company. which was fine. The owner was ready to get out, but he understood that he couldn't handle in his own head relegating or delegating rather responsibilities to a management staff. He had to be more hands-on. So he knows that he's a guy who loves startups and that first level of growth, but he doesn't like what we call mature growth. Again, from my Wall Street days, these are terms that I've brought into this industry, but startup growth is 0 to 1 million. Mature growth is taking business from owner operator to owner manager levels. Because at the end of the day, if you have the purpose of keeping your business and then handing it to your son, then an owner operator level is a great level to be at. But if you're a type of an owner who's looking to create value in your company at some point, hopefully, in order to liquidate or to create the ability to cash out some of that value, the only way to do that is through an owner manager model. The owner can't be hands on because then he is a valuable asset. What you'd love to have is you'd love to have a company where the owner is kind of just overseeing something that's running on their own. That's what this owner manager model does. I call it the process driven model. Very important to understand. The owner is not involved in the daily activities of the business. The management and the staff share responsibilities that have been assigned through a process. The owner's responsibility at this point is to converse with the managers and make sure that the process is being followed, and basically to be the guy there to work at any issues or problems that arise in the process. Obviously, the advantages are that you can have great growth this way. You're allowing for growth and expansion, and you're removing the owner from that time versus money equation. The owner's time now is not directly tied to the revenue of this company. That's a very important aspect because now you're leveraging your time. And the owner has the ability now to plan for what I would call sustainable growth through this company. And they can also devote their efforts and time to other companies or other financial interests, or just spend less time working. That's an equation that the owner decides on. It gives the owner a lot of free time, as we said. The disadvantages are it exposes to the owner to issues that occur without his knowledge or involvement. Remember, the chuck in the truck and the owner operator are around. Very little is going to happen on a project or with a client or within his company that he's not going to be immediately aware of. In this model, things could happen within the company and the management could try on their own to handle the process, and things could spiral out of control without the owner knowing that. That is a disadvantage for those who need to be involved in the process. Very important. I brought up the word process, and I think it's a very important aspect of our business. For those of you who don't know this man, his name is Marcus Lemonis. He has a TV show on CNBC called The Profit. He's a businessman who his most famous business that he started and grew was a business called Camping World. And he took that to great heights and it became a multi-billion-dollar company, and he cashed out. And he is a very, very extremely wealthy man. And what he does on this show now is he goes around the country and he helps small businesses, but he does it in a different way than, let's say, the Crest Network does it. What he does is he entertains companies that ask him to come in to assist them. And what he will do is he will explore their company, and he likes to look at three things we'll discuss in a second. But what he does is, in his way of helping them, he will make a financial investment in the company for an ownership interest. So he actually invests in their companies. Now, many times he'll invest in their companies and then he ends up folding them into his conglomerate. But what he's doing is he's trying to look at companies, and when he studies them, he stresses three things. And this applies so well, and I've been using this for years with all of my clients because it applies so well to our industry and to small businesses in general. Now, mind you, Marcus Lemonis won't invest in restoration companies because he usually doesn't invest in service businesses. He invests more in product-related businesses. But for the sake of argument, let's just talk about the three different things that he invests in. He invests in people, product, and process. So as we discussed, when you go from chuck in a truck to owner operator to owner manager, you're putting more and more emphasis on the people within your company. You're giving them more responsibilities. You're trusting them more. You're allowing them to do the things you were going to do yourself. Through growth in your company, you're going to have to bring on more people to do the same tasks, because if you want 3 and 4 and 5 trucks, you need that many crew leaders and that many helpers and that many project managers. So yes, people are a very important part. He believes that's a very, very key part of any company when he walks in. If the people are not the right type of people, meaning he loves attitude. You can train anybody to do anything, but you can't train attitude. So he loves that. And if he sees that there's not a good group of people there, he won't invest in the company. Next is the product. He loves physical products. He's very into food. He's very into fashion and garments. Those are the kinds of things he invests in. In our industry, our product is our response, how well we do our job. So for us, when we're chucking a truck, we do everything to 100% because we take great pride in our own personal efforts. Well, how do we take that product and not diminish its quality when we go from owner operator to owner manager and we're no longer out there in the field? Well, we do that through the third P, which is the process. The more we grow, the more difficult it is to say, here's the Apex construction way of doing things, or here's the ABC restoration way of doing things. We need to codify and really define what those things are that we do. Remember, chuck in a truck, we don't have to tell anybody what we do, we're just doing it. Owner operator, we have to tell people what to do, but many times we're there to show them. Owner manager, we're not involved at all, so we need to make sure that we have very clear processes in place that anybody walking into the company can follow. Now, don't feel bad if you don't have written processes in place, even if you are at the owner manager stage. That's very, very common in all businesses. And Marcus, when he goes into his businesses, as you can see on the TV show, most of the time he spends on developing processes for the company because he likes the people and more than likely he likes the product. So for him, his buy-in and his value comes in creating a process, whether it be a marketing process, a production process, or a sales process. And we need all of those. So understand that it's very, very key as we grow our staffs and as we go from owner operator to owner manager that we've got good processes in place. Here's how we can make those 3 Ps work for you. Just here's a general process for mitigation. The lead process, the phone call comes in, the lead gets forwarded to whoever, depending on our type of setup we've got. The salesman visits the loss site, the work off gets signed, then it turns into a production. Now it's a job. Now the crew gets dispatched, the extraction, demo, cleaning, and setting of equipment takes place, and then the monitoring and removing equipment. Now we've got the invoicing. The sketch and scope get written, the invoice gets prepared, it gets submitted to the client, and then we go into the collections process. This would be a rough outline of a process. We would need to have detailed information for each one of these steps. The person taking the phone call should have an entire script on the key things that they're asking about that loss or about that lead. By the time it gets forwarded, the salesman should have an entire script and routine prepared, mostly for overcoming no, overcoming objections, all those kinds of things that we need to know about to make sure we can do our job and get that job closed. Obviously, when the work off gets signed, we need to make sure all the paperwork is properly filled out. We need to have processes and training for all of that. We clearly know we have to have our guys trained, and it's not just enough to say they've got a WRT. We need to give them a training. If you're ABC restoration, there needs to be an ABC way to do demo, an ABC way to do extraction, an ABC way to set equipment. We can't rely on WRTs because what happens if we hire a guy from another company who was trained by a different instructor than the rest of your staff, and he was trained slightly differently on how to calculate your equipment levels? You can't have 2 or 3 crews operating using 2 or 3 different sets of standards. The company needs to have one standard. So this process that we're talking about is extremely important, guys. So in a perfect company, we want to make sure that all 3 Ps work together. We establish the processes based on the objectives of the company, which is the objectives of you, the owner. What are your goals? What does your mission and vision statement look like? That's what you need to do to develop your processes. From there, we have to make sure that the people fit the process. Don't design your process around your staff. I'm going to say it again. Do not design your process around your staff. Design your process around the wishes of how you want your company to operate, and then staff the positions within that process accordingly. If you do it the other way around and you rely too much on your people, you're now putting too much power in any one individual, and that's what we don't want in a process-driven company. If you can get the process established and you can get people to fill the roles to fit the process, your result will be a superior product. They will do a great job out in the field on every one of your losses if they know what their expectations are. Okay, let's talk about the different staffing models within production. That's really what I want to concentrate on here today. Once we're at the owner-manager level, we have 2 ways we can go with our staffing on the production level. We have what we call a crew chief model. A crew chief model is where we give a lot of power to the head of our 2 or 3-man team that we're sending out to our losses. Now, some of you might be sending out a single person for a 1-man crew. And if you're doing that, that's fine. I have my own opinions on when a 1-man crew works, but let's just leave it that you're sending out 1 or a 2-man crew, and that's what your crew chief would be, your lead person. So he's going to handle setting the scope of work, getting the work authorization signed, running the project, and he's going to also monitor the project. At this point, you need an estimator. You need someone else who's going to do the sketch, who's going to prepare the invoice based on the information provided to them from the crew chief on length of time the equipment was on, the amount of the flood cuts, things like that. And then you're also going to need a file manager who's going to be what I call the funnel for all of that data and information that comes from the crew chief and heads to the estimator. That would be a normal structure for what I would call a crew chief model. Okay, moving over to a PM model, that would be a slightly different method. The PM model is going to use a project manager. Your project manager at this point is less of a doer and more of a salesman. He's going to go out and he's going to set the scope of work. He's going to get the work auth signed, but he's also going to do the sketch, the monitoring, preparing of the invoice, and communicating with the client and the insurance company when applicable. Your crew chief is only going to do project execution. That's all you want your crew chief to be able to do. And then your file manager is still going to do the same amount of work that they were doing before. Okay, those are 2 models. I'm going to show them to you now in what I call hierarchy charts. Okay, we've all seen these charts before, flow charts of who the people are in the company. I've created 2 generic flow charts. I created a basic crew member model, and the other one I've created is a full-blown PM model. So we're going to start with the basic crew leader model. This model, guys, can work as an owner-operator or an owner-manager model. When you look at the next PM model, you'll understand how you can turn it into a PM model. Right now, this is designed as an owner-operator, not an owner-manager model. So this is using crew leaders within an owner-operator model. You'll notice we've got the owner at the top, and then we've got the different branches. We've got the marketing staff, we've got the office staff, and then we've got in red all of the production staff. Okay, we're assuming here we've got a two-man crew, and we're assuming that we've got two separate crews. What we've got is a total of 6 people in our production staff. In this model, we have our crew leader doing all of those tasks that we talked about before. We've got the crew leader going out, scoping the job, signing up the job, making sure they get all of the paperwork, making sure they get all the information, establishing the workload. We've got the estimator now having to go sketch the job and then getting all the information from the file manager, who is going to be taking the paperwork that comes from the field and funneling it and cleaning it up and making sure it's all there for the estimator to create an accurate invoice. Okay, this is what I would call a very simple, basic model for your production staff. Okay, your office staff, I only have one block there because we're doing this as an owner operator model. We've got a very, very small support staff. And marketing, I've got one block there because more than likely the owner is handling the marketing, or one marketer is there directly responsible to answer to the owner. So if you have a company and you've got, 10 or so employees, more than likely this is what your chart would look like. This is what your staffing model would look like, an owner operator model. Okay. You'll see I split the model in half. On the top, we've got ownership and oversight. And on the bottom, we've got all of the production crews and all of the workers. On the next chart, you're going to see, which is what I laid out as the PM model, but I also laid it out as a full-blown model. You're going to see far more levels. So on this chart, as we look at this, we see that we've got far more levels. We're talking about, on the ownership level, we've added in prime management in the role of a general manager, and we've added in division management with the idea of having a manager for the office, a manager for marketing, and a manager for production. So again, let's go back real quick. If we look at oversight, there's one person in an owner operator model. There's the owner. Going to owner manager model, now we've got 3 layers of oversight. You've got 2 layers between yourself, the owner, and the workers. Like I said before, many times this is something that owners have a very difficult time adjusting to. They love the hands-on approach. They love to be involved because many times a lot of us as owners started as workers, so we still have that affinity for the field. This model, this PM model, this huge full-blown model of owner-manager is much more for businessmen than it is for restorers. I laugh all the time. Dick and I talk all the time. I always like when I ask somebody, what do you do? And if they say I'm a restorer, that tells me a lot about their mindset. It tells me that they think of themselves as a production person first. If they tell me that they're an entrepreneur, they're a businessman, and they own a restoration company, that tells me much more about their mindset in terms of being able to handle this kind of model. So think about it and give yourself an honest answer. Do you consider yourself a restorer, or do you consider yourself a businessman? If you consider yourself a restorer, this model might be difficult for you to handle, and you might need a lot more hand-holding to get you from the knowledge and the involvement standpoint to the oversight and trust standpoint. We can discuss that further, obviously, if you consider yourself a restorer. If you consider yourself a businessman and your company's not yet here, this is what your goal should be. This, obviously, we had 8 to 10 bubbles on the previous chart. On this chart, we theoretically could have an unlimited number of bubbles. I just wanted to show you the main layers so that you understand how deep we're talking. Before, we had 2 layers of production, 1 layer of oversight. Here, we've got 3 layers of workers And you could obviously have more if you needed, but right now we've got 3 layers of workers and 3 total layers of oversight. An owner would always need, in this model, would always need a general manager, someone who is their right-hand man, as we all know in most businesses. That general manager is going to be the person to translate the 10,000-foot view to the people on the ground. The general manager is that person to do that. He's going to make sure that what is the wishes of the owner gets applied through the processes. The level where it lists division management, those people are going to be the ones directly interacting with the workers. They are going to be the ones that are hands-on out in the field. They are going to act like the owner operator did. They're going to have the conversations. They're going to oversee the projects. They are the ones who are going to demand processes get followed. They will then report back to the general manager any and all issues. The general manager also is responsible for making sure that anything that has to go between divisions is handled properly. Many times your marketers might have issues with how the production is going out in the field. For instance, if your marketer is getting leads from a plumber and a couple of days later your plumber calls up the marketer and says, "Hey, Joey, I don't know what happened on this job, but Mrs. Smith just called me and she's not very happy." Listen, as great as we might be and as good as our processes might be, every once in a while those are going to happen. Well, if the marketer has an issue, the last thing we want him to do is start storming onto the job and start screaming at our workers. So very much like in any other business or in the military, we would love the chain of command to work. We would love the marketer to go to his manager, or we would love that manager to communicate with the production manager about any issues that are coming up. That's the proper communication line. That's why on this chart, you'll see where the lines touch. You'll notice that the marketer line never touches anyone else but the marketing manager. That's who he should be communicating with. You'll notice all of the managers on the division management level all touch each other, and they all touch the general manager as well, but they don't touch the owner. Again, outside of very rare circumstances, maybe one of the managers is being harassed by the general manager, then they can go outside the chain. But for regular job process discussions, that's why the chain of command exists the way it does. This is a very important model. And for you guys, it's not only important to understand where you stand as owners, it's also very important for your staff to understand and look at it and understand why and how the communication moves the way it does. Let's look at the production a little bit. You'll notice on the project manager, the production manager side, what do I have listed there? I've got a project manager listed directly underneath him. That project manager has everybody else in the crew, in the production crew, underneath him with the exception of the warehouse manager. Again, if you've got a warehouse manager, that's somebody who's there to keep the equipment clean, to keep the trucks clean, to fix any broken equipment, to just basically take care of everything here, not out in the field. But you have a project manager. So in a PM model, we're putting a lot of emphasis and support in the project manager. Remember, again, I'm going to flash back real quick. In the crew leader model, you had one helper below the crew leader, and you basically had each crew leader responsible for their own crew reporting back to the owner. In this model, we've got crews that are established, and I put 3 crews here, and each one of those 3 crews reports back to the project manager. Because what did we discuss before? We said the project manager or the PM model, he is responsible for signing the jobs up, setting the scope, creating the invoices, doing the monitoring. So all the information for every project flows through him. He is the man on the ground. He reports to the division manager if there are any issues, but for all the jobs, that's what he does. He communicates with the file manager and makes sure it all gets done. Okay? What are we missing here? If you remember back on this chart, on the production side over here, we have an estimator. There's no estimator listed here on the PM model because we've taken the responsibilities of estimating and creating the invoices away from a separate person, and we have folded them into the project manager role. Like I said, the project manager is more of a salesman and more of a administrative person than he is truly a production person. Now, what's the advantages and disadvantages over a PM model over a crew leader model? Well, the first and most important advantage is when you've got crews that are only doing the physical work, and I call it day one or top day work. They're doing the demo, they're doing the extraction, they're doing the cleaning, and they're doing the setting of the equipment. In most cases, that's done on the first day. Well, if that's all they're doing, and then the project manager has to go back and monitor, that means that your crews can actually do more work than normal. Right? If we do the math for most of our companies in our industry, we assume that each one of our crews can do 2 or 3 jobs a week because we think that they have to do that work, and then we also think they have to monitor as well. And that monitoring is a double whammy for us because it takes a lot of time to drive around and spend just a few minutes at a job. It also, for most of us, we have two-man crews. It also eats up a lot of money out of our budget because instead of sending one person out to do this work, we're sending 2 people out to do monitoring, yet it's almost impossible to charge for 2 people to do the monitoring. So by letting our project manager do the monitoring, we're allowing one person to do it. We're taking those tasks away from the crew leader and the helper. So technically our crews could handle more work. I've seen companies where in instituting this model, we were able to take our crews from an average of 2.5 jobs a week to an average of 4.5 jobs a week. That almost doubled their production value without adding 1 penny of additional payroll. That is real value. So you don't need to have as many crews to do as much work. Now, your project manager could get overwhelmed if you're the type of company that's got 30 and 40 projects going in a month. One project manager is not capable of managing all of that. There's no way, if you take 30 jobs would be a job a day, there's no way a project manager could show up to a job, get it signed, scope it out, sketch it out, create the invoice, and monitor that job every day while a new one's coming in every day. That's just too much work. Anecdotally, the number seems to be that a project manager under this model can handle about 25 leads and or 20 closed jobs. So that's a good target. If you're closing 80% of your leads, that's fantastic. If you can give them 25 leads a month with 20 closed jobs, that's about what a project manager can handle. So if you're a company that's doing 40, 50 jobs, you may need to add a second or third project manager. But understand this. In the old model, in the crew leader model, they could only handle 2 or 3 jobs a week. So let's just say that's 12 jobs a month, and that's pushing it. In order to do 40 jobs, or 50 jobs, you would need 4, 5, 6 crews, and that's pushing them. So you would need, let's just say, 5 crews to do 50 jobs. Now, under this model, you can get away with using 3 crews and getting 50 jobs done with 2 PMs. The other advantage of using a PM model over a crew leader model is if your one PM is going out to 25 jobs and signing 20 of them, and he's writing 20 invoices, every single one of those invoices is going to look identical because it's one single person writing them. If you've got 3 different crews doing the same 20 or 30 jobs, it's going to be very difficult to get all 3 crew leaders to write exactly the same invoices, or you're going to overwhelm your estimator because they're going to be getting data from different people. Finally, I happen to prefer using a PM who has the training and understanding of what he's looking at to write the invoices, because I don't like estimators, especially estimators who don't go out in the field. Yes, there are many systems out there where you can use checklists and you can use a lot of training and they can be Xactimate trained, but there's still something that comes about when you're trying to defend your invoice, where knowing the technical aspects of what you did out on a job helps. And if you're just using somebody in an office who's never been out to a job, who's creating the invoice, when it comes time to try to defend it, and we all know we have to do that from time to time, that's a much more difficult model. You'll also see that we have an incredible ability for growth here because we've got managers for the office and managers for marketing. I've only got one marketer there, but most companies that get into the $3, $4, $5 million range might have 3 or 4 marketers. And yes, they need a manager for those 3 and 4 marketers. The owner should not be managing their marketers. One big advantage of being involved with the Crest Network is that if you're an elite level Crest member, Dick Wagner provides that marketing management for you. So that's a really big plus that as a Crest member that you're able to enjoy. And hopefully many of you are enjoying that management style and management ability that Dick provides. But it is important to understand that you cannot manage the marketing as the owner. You can be involved in marketing, absolutely. You can do whatever you need to do. If you want to go to B2Bs, if you want to meet the owner of a plumbing company, those kinds of things, yes. But that should all take place through the control of the manager. Finally, you'll also notice that the general manager has to oversee a little bit of everything, but the workers are given a lot of responsibility. Yes, the general manager doesn't really do a lot physically. He really represents you. So he's your second in command, but the office manager will have a lot of responsibilities. It won't just be them sitting around looking at bookkeepers and secretaries and anybody else you've got in your office. You might have collections people, and you might have all of the finance pieces fall under the office manager as well. That's perfectly acceptable. But that office manager, the division management side are workers. Even though they're listed under oversight, they're workers. They're on the ground, hands-on people. You're just giving them additional responsibilities to make sure that the processes beneath them are being carried out. So don't be too scared that you're going to have what one owner told me is a hell of a lot of people on payroll sitting around doing nothing. In theory, you've got one person sitting around doing nothing, which is the general manager, and he is really representing you in the company, because under this model, you don't even need to be in the building. So let's understand both the PM model as it relates to production and also this full-blown staffing model as it relates to being an owner manager. If you put the two of them together, this is what it should ultimately look like. Like I said before, this is an owner-operator model with a crew leader setup. This would be an owner-manager model with a PM setup. It's very important to understand where you want to be as a company, and it's very important for you to buy in to a direction that you want to take your company. There is no right or wrong answer. The vast majority of small businesses in our country operate as owner-operator or chuck-in-a-truck models. There's nothing wrong with that. If you are happy at that level and you're making money and you're comfortable, that's where you belong. Conversely, if you want to grow, I'm just letting you know, in this industry, for the size of business and the type of work that we do, if you want to grow past $1.2 million or so, it is going to be difficult to do so under an owner-operator model. We will need to go to an owner-manager model. Okay. If any of you would like to have these charts, obviously they'll be on the video on the website, but I can provide these charts to you, and I could also work individually with you to create your own current flow chart and maybe put together something for the future. I want to thank you very much for joining us today here at the Crest Network. I did want to point out, for those of you who are going through this difficult time right now, on our Facebook page, I've been putting up a little post every day called 10 Days to a Better Company. And it's being geared towards owners, and it's little simple things that you guys can be doing. One little small task a day for the next 10 days. And I started it a week ago, so we're already up to day 6 or 7. But I just want you to be able to take a look at those. They're really simple things, but they will give you a lot of insight onto what your company looks like right now. And especially for those of us who have slowed down a little bit, trying to make sure we can tread water and continue rowing while we're in this uncharted waters. Let's make sure we're doing the things and being productive in our time. So I've got these little short, ideas up on Facebook. My plan is to have a video series of 10 to 12 short videos that are going to complement these tasks right after the 10 days are up, which will be this coming week. That will be up on our website shortly as well, and I hope you'll look forward to those. On behalf of Dick Wagner, I'm Bill Giannone, and I really want to thank you for joining us, and we look forward to talking with you and seeing you at our next event, hopefully in June. And for everybody out there, thanks so much and have a great day. Bye-bye.